And then finally, going back to the topic of charisma or authenticity, these special characteristics that leaders have. Slide number 4. Leaders, of course, whatever their organization, have different roles. One role is interpersonal. It is the role of getting on with other people. It has been said that leaders have two very different functions: getting along with and getting ahead of the people they're with. But leadership, interpersonal leadership, is the ability to be good with people, to be a figurehead such that when you appear in the media or the press, you are the representative of your group. And I shall talk about in a few minutes why leaders have to look good and be able to express clearly the values and the aims of their company. They have to interact with all the stakeholders. They have to interact with their staff, with their subordinates, with their customers, with their clients. They have a liaison role. So all this has got to do with other people and the ability to get on with other people. Now this is called emotional intelligence. It is very important for leaders. We see this in our country at the moment. Our Prime Minister here in England, Mr. Brown, does not have nearly the same interpersonal skills as our previous Prime Minister, Mr. Blair, and everybody talks about it. So that's one role. The second role is informational. It is about the use of and the control of information. Information is power. Leaders have to monitor information. That is, they have to check up on whether they have enough information. They have to disseminate information. They have to give information to various people. They have to be a spokesperson. They have to process data. They have to process information. They have to help get other people to get and gather the appropriate information they need. And their third role, of course, is decisional. They have to make decisions. They have to make clear decisions. They have to make courageous decisions. They have to handle conflict. So the roles of leaders have to do with people, with information, and with decisions. I want to spend quite a lot of time talking about the trait approach to leaders. So I'd like to look at slide 5 now. And this is the question why this approach to leadership failed. It was an approach which lasted many years and continues today. And the question is this: what are the special characteristics of very successful leaders? What do they have about them? What do they have inside them? Why is it that they have such ability? Well, the problem arose because different people came up with different lists. A researcher looking at American presidents would come up with his list. A person looking at business people would come up with their list. German researchers had different lists from British researchers, and there was no agreement about what these lists were. I will show you one of these in a moment. The problem was that they also came up with very different characteristics. So surprisingly, they mentioned such things as physical characteristics. Our leaders have to look good. We know from studies that successful leaders, by and large, tend to be handsome and fit. American presidents are all tall. If you look at successful business leaders, you will see that they look healthy and young. They run up onto the stage. Very few of them are overweight. People want to see in their leaders signs of physical fitness, and therefore the physical characteristics of leaders has been studied. We know, for instance, that most men have their hair, that you have a better chance of being elected a leader if you are good-looking, tall, strong, and fit. Now, some people have said that has nothing to do with leadership, and they may be right. But we like our leaders to look good, to look fit, to look strong, and we elect them. Next, there is an issue of social background. They say here in England we are obsessed by social class, by a person's background, whether you are middle class or working class or upper class. Social class is associated with wealth, but it is also associated with education and values. Most of our prime ministers all went to the same school. Many business leaders went to similar universities. Why should that relate to leadership? Well, it could be that these universities and these schools attract people, select people. Maybe you have to be very bright to go to a particular school. We know that intelligence is relevant to leadership. So it's not surprising that leaders often come from similar backgrounds, come from a particular social strata. Next, there is the issue of abilities, and I want to talk about this in a few moments. The question is not of personality, but of ability, intelligence, cognitive ability. Leaders need to be clever enough to do the job well. We know that as you go up organizations, people tend to be cleverer. In the military, a general needs to be cleverer than a major, who needs to be cleverer than a sergeant. Why? Because they have all information to process. They have to learn new things. They have to be more adaptable. Intelligence and ability is very important for leadership. Yes, you need other things as well, but you do need intelligence. Another factor that they began to argue about was personality, and I shall talk about that in detail in a moment. The question is, which personality characteristics predict good leadership? We know the answer to that question now, although for a long time it was not known. And finally, there was an argument about social skills. Some people called social skills emotional intelligence, assertiveness. These are skills associated with people, soft skills, the ability to persuade, the ability to charm, the ability to understand other people's emotions. What is emotional intelligence? Well, it's really two things. It's about being aware of and being able to manage my emotions, and to be aware of and how to manage other people's emotions. If you have emotional intelligence, you will be perceptive. You will understand when people are cross or tired or frightened or bewildered. The good leader is able not only to perceive that, but also to do something about it, to encourage and persuade. So the problem was that when people listed the characteristics associated with leadership, they mentioned all sorts of things. Some of them mentioned physical characteristics, some did not. Some mentioned social background, others thought that wasn't important. Some mentioned abilities, some mentioned personality. And the problem was that nobody could agree on that list. So slide 6. Slide 6 shows why this early work failed. First of all, the traits were not rank ordered. In other words, what people would do is they'd come up with a list of things that are associated with good leaders. I would have my list, maybe you had your list. But even within those lists, there was no rank order. Which is more important? Is it more important to be tall, or is it more important to be clever? Is it more important to be fit, or is it more important to be charming? Nobody agreed. Secondly, the trait approach was retrospective. What does that mean? It means we looked back. You saw, here is a great business leader. We looked back at his career, at his history, at her history, and said what things in their past affected their leadership skills. But we don't know whether these were cause or correlation. In other words, we don't know whether these factors led to the person becoming a great leader, or rather that they were a consequence of being chosen as a leader. We look back, not forward. It's retrospective, not prospective. Fourthly, we didn't know whether these traits were, as we say in English, necessary or sufficient. In other words, is this list enough? Are all these absolutely necessary, or are they sufficient? Are there other things as well? Have we got to have special other characteristics? Again, there was no agreement on that. And finally, the traits ignored the role of subordinates and the situation. In other words, we looked only at things inside people. They never looked at the situation. They never looked at the other people. And that is why there was such disagreement. So this approach faltered. It faltered because there was no agreement. Let me show you slide 6A. Slide 6A is the work of a very famous American researcher who has worked in this field for many years. His name is Locke. And he has come up with a set of these characteristics. You will see that drive is a very important characteristic. It is the desire for achievement, for being ambitious, high energy, tenacity. Some people have got energy. Some want it. Some are hungry. Some really, really, really want to succeed and get there. This is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You need other things as well. What else do you need? You need honesty and integrity. Many people have drive, but they are not honest. Criminals have drive. Lots of people with low ability have drive. But another very important characteristic, I shall show you this again, is integrity and honesty. Why? We want to trust our leaders. If we don't trust our leaders, we don't follow them. So Locke's second characteristic is honesty and drive. What else? Third, the motivation to become a leader, to want to actually do the job. Next, this issue around self-confidence. Self-confidence is very important. Self-esteem, self-evaluation. Why? We want our leaders to feel good about themselves. We want them to have confidence in their abilities. Not too much and not too little, but to be called self-aware. Do I know what I am good at, and am I confident in those beliefs? It is important that there is a match between self-confidence and ability. It is no good being confident about things I'm not good at. Equally, it is very sad to see very able people not confident enough. Let me talk about that a little later. He also mentions cognitive ability, intelligence. That's what that is. Next, knowledge of the business. No leader is successful without understanding the business that he or she is in. I am going today on an aeroplane to Abu Dhabi. I have done a lot of work in the airline business. It is the business which is having severe problems. It is different from the hotel business, although the hotel business is very similar. I am interested in the educational business. I am interested in the business of manufacturing. All these are different, and you have to understand the business. Next, Locke talks about creativity. Some people are more creative than others, more innovative, more able to come up with new ideas. Creativity might be important in some businesses more than others. And he mentions flexibility. Why? Because things change. Things change all the time, and we have to be flexible. So the list we have on this slide is drive, honesty and integrity, leadership motivation, self-confidence, cognitive ability, knowledge of the business, creativity, and flexibility. That's a good list, but not everybody would agree with it. Some would say this is not as important as that, or that something is missing. And this is where the trouble began with the early work. That is a very healthy, well-researched list, but there will be disagreement.